Paradoxes are situations that seem to contradict themselves and often challenge our intuition and understanding of the world. They can be confusing, but they are also fascinating and thought-provoking, and can be used to encourage critical thinking and to explore the limits of our understanding. 1. The Barber Paradox. The Barber Paradox is a classic paradox that has been around for centuries. It goes like this: in a small village, there is a barber who shaves all men who do not shave themselves. The question is, who shaves the barber? The paradox arises because if the barber shaves himself, then he is not one of the men who do not shave themselves, so he should not shave himself. But if he does not shave himself, then he is one of the men who do not shave themselves, so he should shave himself. This creates a logical loop that has no solution. The Barber Paradox can be understood as a problem of self-reference, where a statement refers to itself in a way that creates a contradiction. 2. The Liar Paradox. The Liar Paradox is a statement that contradicts itself, and goes like this: this statement is false. If the statement is true, then it is false, and if it is false, then it is true. The Liar Paradox highlights the difficulties that can arise when dealing with statements that refer to themselves. It is a paradox because the statement cannot be both true and false at the same time, yet it seems to imply that it is both. This paradox is often used to demonstrate the limitations of classical logic and to encourage critical thinking about the nature of truth and falsehood. 3. The Crocodile Dilemma. The Crocodile Dilemma is a paradox that involves a promise and a prediction, and goes like this: a crocodile has stolen a child and promises to return the child if and only if a certain villager can correctly guess what the crocodile will do with the child. If the villager guesses correctly, the crocodile will not return the child, and if the villager guesses incorrectly, the crocodile will return the child. The paradox arises because the villager's guess affects the outcome, but the outcome also affects the guess. This creates a logical loop that has no solution. 4. The Paradox of the Court. The paradox of the court is a paradox that involves a legal trial, and goes like this: a court is trying a man who is accused of declaring that all statements in the court are false. If the man's statement is true, then all statements in the court are false, including his own statement, meaning that his statement must be false. But if his statement is false, then not all statements in the court are false, meaning that his statement must be true. The paradox arises because the man's statement creates a contradiction, and the court cannot determine whether the statement is true or false. It is also used to study the foundations of logic and to explore the limitations of classical logic. 5. The Twins Paradox. The Twins Paradox is a scientific paradox that involves time dilation and goes like this: two identical twins, one of whom stays on Earth while the other travels in a spaceship at relativistic speeds, will age differently due to time dilation effects. The paradox arises because the twin in the spaceship will experience time at a slower rate than the twin on Earth, due to the effects of special relativity. This means that when the twin in the spaceship returns to Earth, he will have aged less than his twin who stayed on Earth. The Twins Paradox highlights the counterintuitive nature of the effects of special relativity, and how our intuition about time and space can be challenged by the laws of physics. 6. The Monty Hall Paradox. The Monty Hall Paradox is a paradox that involves probability and goes like this: given 3 doors, behind one of which is a prize, a player is asked to pick a door. After the player picks a door, the host opens one of the other doors to reveal a goat, and gives the player the opportunity to switch to the other unopened door. Should the player switch, or stick with their original choice? The paradox arises because the player's chances of winning the prize are actually higher if they switch to the other door, despite the fact that their original choice seemed just as likely to be correct. The Monty Hall Paradox highlights the importance of considering all the factors that may affect a situation and the importance of understanding probability and statistics. 7. The Paradox of the Arrow. The paradox of the arrow is a paradox that involves the concept of motion. The paradox goes like this: if an arrow is in flight, is it in motion or at rest? If it's in motion, then it must be moving from one point to another, and if it's at rest, then it can't be moving at all. This paradox is often used to illustrate the concept of Zeno's paradoxes, which are a series of paradoxes first introduced by the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea. The paradox of the arrow is meant to challenge our intuitive understanding of motion and time and to show that motion and time are not as straightforward as we might think. The paradox can be resolved by considering the concept of relative motion. According to the theory of relativity, motion is relative, and there is no absolute state of rest or motion. The arrow is moving relative to some frame of reference, such as the ground or the air, but it is not moving relative to itself. So, the paradox of the arrow is a misunderstanding that arises from assuming that there is an absolute state of rest or motion. 8. The black hole information paradox. This scientific paradox involves the laws of quantum mechanics and the theory of general relativity, and it goes like this. According to quantum mechanics, information cannot be destroyed, but black holes are thought to completely destroy anything that falls into them. This creates a paradox, as it seems that information would be lost in a black hole, which goes against the laws of quantum mechanics. The paradox arises because the theory of general relativity describes black holes as objects with an event horizon, beyond which nothing can escape, not even light. This means that anything that falls into a black hole is thought to be lost forever. On the other hand, quantum mechanics tells us that energy cannot be destroyed, and that it must always be preserved. The paradox is that it seems that information is destroyed by black holes, but it can't be according to quantum mechanics. One way to resolve the paradox is to consider the idea of black hole evaporation, which is a process by which black holes lose mass over time due to the emission of Hawking radiation. This radiation is thought to carry energy about the material that has fallen into the black hole, which would mean that the energy is not lost after all. However, this resolution is still a matter of ongoing debate among physicists, and the paradox remains unresolved. 9. The Fermi Paradox. This one is a paradox that arises from the apparent contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations existing in the universe and the lack of evidence for their existence. The paradox is named after the physicist Enrico Fermi, who is said to have posed the question, "Where is everybody?" The paradox is based on the assumption that the universe is vast and old, and that the conditions for the development of life are common. If this is the case, then it is likely that there are many civilizations in the universe that are much older and more advanced than ours. However, despite the numerous searches for extraterrestrial life and the detection of many exoplanets that could potentially support life, no evidence of extraterrestrial civilizations has been found. 10. The Grandfather Paradox. This is a paradox in time travel that arises from the idea of changing the past. The paradox goes like this. Suppose you were able to travel back in time and kill your own grandfather before he had children. If you did this, then your own father, or mother, would never have been born, which means that you wouldn't have been born either. And if you weren't born, then you couldn't have gone back in time to kill your grandfather. This creates a logical loop, as the initial event, your trip back in time, seems to be both the cause and the result of its own outcome. The grandfather paradox illustrates the difficulties and paradoxes that can arise when trying to change the past. One way to resolve the paradox is to consider the idea of multiple universes, or the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this idea, every time a time traveler goes back in time, they create a new universe in which their actions play out, while their original universe remains unchanged. In this way, the paradox is resolved, as the time traveler's actions in the past do not affect their own past, but rather create a new and separate timeline. The Bootstrap Paradox. The Bootstrap Paradox is a paradox in time travel that arises from the idea of self-causation, where an object or piece of information exists without a clear origin. The paradox is named after the concept of bootstrapping, where one pulls oneself up by one's own bootstraps, which is a metaphorical way of describing self-sufficient or self-created systems. The paradox goes like this. Suppose you are able to travel back in time and give a piece of information or an object to someone in the past, who then uses that information or object to create a new and improved version. Over time, this improved version is passed down and becomes the original piece of information or object that you obtained in your own time. In this way, the paradox is created, as the origin of the information or object becomes unclear, as it seems to have been created by itself. The Bootstrap Paradox is a thought experiment that raises questions about the nature of causality and the origin of information and objects. It challenges our assumptions about the linearity of time and the idea that every event has a clear cause and effect. The idea of the Bootstrap Paradox has been used in several works of fiction, including the movie Interstellar 2014. Finally, the YouTube Paradox. If you subscribe, you may watch more videos like this. If you watch videos like this, you may subscribe. Just kidding. Like, share and subscribe.